Subscribe to keep this channel alive. 2 hours after Benazir Bhutto died, the street where she was killed was washed with fire hoses. Not swept, not cordoned, washed. By the time investigators were finally allowed to work the site 2 full days later, they were able to recover 23 pieces of evidence. In a bomb and gun attack on a former prime minister in a crowd of thousands, the expected yield was into thousands of items. They got 23. And 10 weeks before that afternoon, she had written down in advance who she thought would be responsible. This is the story of a woman who was, on paper, the most protected person in Pakistan. On paper. And of the specific, documented decisions, some of them made within minutes of her death, that ensured no one would ever be convicted of killing her. Most accounts of this case argue about one question: who fired the shot? That is not this video. Because the more remarkable fact is this: in April 2010, a 3-member United Nations Commission of Inquiry, a Chilean ambassador, a former Indonesian Attorney General, and a former Deputy Commissioner of the Irish Police, spent 9 months on this case. They conducted more than 250 interviews. They produced a 65-page report, and they named nobody as her killer. What they did instead was something harder. They documented, step by step, how a state can lose a murder case on purpose. Their conclusion was that her death could have been prevented if adequate security measures had been taken, and that the failure to investigate it properly was not incompetence. The word they used was deliberate. So here is what you need to understand before anything else. She knew. She said so, and she wrote it down. 18 October 2007, Karachi. After 8 years of self-imposed exile in Dubai and London, Benazir Bhutto came home. The city stopped. Hundreds of thousands of people filled the route from the airport toward the tomb of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Her convoy moved at walking pace for 10 hours. Just after midnight, near Karsaz, 2 explosions tore through the crowd directly in front of her truck. She survived. She was inside the vehicle when the bombs went off. The official Sindh government figure was 149 dead. Her party counted 177 dead and 630 injured, and said bodies were never recovered from the chaos. Most of them were her own supporters, people who had come to stand in the street for her. She held a press conference the following day, and the thing she asked about was not the bombers. It was the streetlights. She said her security team had been unable to prevent the attack because the streetlights along the route had been switched off. She asked for an inquiry into why. She never got an answer. Her advisor, Mark Siegel, later testified that the mobile phone jammers provided for her protection that night were not operational. 5 days after that, Pakistani Prime Minister publicly rejected her party's request to bring in foreign forensic experts. Pakistani agencies, he said, could handle it objectively. Nobody has ever been convicted for Karsaz. 3 separate inquiry committees have produced nothing. She had 10 weeks left. Here's the part most people have never heard. 8 days after the Karachi bombing, on 26 October 2007, she sent an email to Mark Siegel, her advisor in Washington. She had already written a letter to President Pervez Musharraf naming individuals she considered threats to her life. The email went further. In it, she wrote that in addition to the names in that letter, she would hold Musharraf himself responsible, because the refusal to let her hire private security and the refusal to let her use tinted windows on 4 police vehicles covering all sides of her car could not have happened without him. Then, she attached a condition to it. Siegel forwarded the email to CNN's Wolf Blitzer. Blitzer had to agree before he was permitted to read it that he would only ever use it if she was killed. He agreed. He then sat on it. Think about what that means. For 10 weeks, a woman's accusation of her own future murder sat unread in a newsroom in Washington, waiting for a condition to be met. On 27th December, it was met. Siegel later testified in a Pakistani anti-terrorism court about a phone call between Musharraf and Bhutto in September 2007. He said she came off that call shaken and told him that Musharraf did not want her to return to Pakistan and that her safety depended on the state of her relationship with him. Musharraf's camp always denied this account. It was never proven in court. But it became the foundation of the charge sheet that Pakistan's own federal investigation agency eventually filed against a former head of state. Which raises the obvious question. If the government knew she was a target, and it did, what did around her actually look like on the last day? The answer exists in writing. If you're finding this one worth your time, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We release a new documentary every week. Now back to Rawalpindi. 27th December 2007. What was promised? The security plan for Liaquat Bog was a formal document, and the UN Commission read it. It called for 1,371 police officers deployed at the venue, 3 walk-through metal detector gates at the public entrances, constables positioned on the rooftops of surrounding buildings carrying automatic rifles and binoculars. That is the paper. Here is the ground. There was no standby ambulance at the rally. The one ambulance available had been repurposed to carry party officials. When the attack came, her backup bulletproof Mercedes left the scene early, and she was driven to hospital in the damaged vehicle she had been standing in. Her own security advisor, Rehman Malik, said afterwards that everywhere else in Pakistan, police formed a physical ring around her car. He said that with 300 or 400 officers around the vehicle, the attacker could not have reached her. And on the morning of that same day, the Director General of the ISI, General Nadeem Taj, met her in person. He told her the agency was concerned about a possible terrorist attack and urged her to limit her public exposure and keep a low profile at Liaquat Bog that afternoon. She was told there was a threat. She was not given the officers. She went anyway. She always did. She spoke to a packed crowd. Afterwards, leaving the park in a white Land Cruiser, she stood up through the escape hatch in the roof to wave. A gunman fired from close range on her left. 3 shots are audible in the video. Then, the bomb. At least 20 other people at that exit died with her. She was pronounced dead at Rawalpindi General Hospital shortly after 6 in the evening. And then the accounts began to contradict each other. The Interior Ministry said that night she had been killed by a bullet. Within days, the government reversed itself. The shooter had missed, and the blast had thrown her against the lever of the sunroof, fracturing her skull. Her party rejected that outright. Her spokeswoman, Sherry Rahman, who had ridden with her body to the hospital, said publicly she had died of a bullet injury. The family members who washed her body for burial said the same. No autopsy was ever performed. The UN Commission found that the Rawalpindi city police officer, Saud Aziz, refused doctors' requests for a post-mortem on 3 separate occasions. Aziz's own account was the opposite, that he had insisted on one and written to his superiors from the airbase as her body was flown south to record she was leaving without a post-mortem. Both versions are in the record. One of them is true. And within 2 hours of her death, the street was being hosed. Every senior police officer the commission spoke to said the same thing. Washing a crime scene is fundamentally inconsistent with Pakistani police practice. So who ordered it? Paragraph 133 of the UN report contains the answer that Pakistan has never officially accepted. Sources told the commission that Saeed Aziz could not make that decision independently, that he was ordered to hose down the scene by the then head of military intelligence, Major General Nadeem Ijaz Ahmad, a relative of Musharraf's wife. Other officers told the commission something more careful, that Aziz had not acted alone and that everyone knows who gave the order. They would not put on record what that sentence meant. A Pakistani committee later cleared Nadeem Ijaz entirely and fixed criminal liability on nobody. The UN chairman's assessment of the hosing was blunt. It went beyond mere incompetence, and it was for Pakistani authorities to decide whether it was criminal. There is one more finding, and it may be the most damning. The government publicly blamed Taliban commander Baitullah Mehsud and al-Qaeda the morning after, producing an intelligence intercept with a speed that stunned the public before any serious investigation had begun. The commission concluded that this preempted, prejudiced, and hindered everything. The official version is that 2 teenage bombers were sent to Liaquat Bagh, Bilal, also called Saeed, and Ikra Mullah, and that only one of them detonated. The forensic evidence does not sit comfortably with that. A shawl, a cap, and a pair of joggers belonging to the bombers were recovered from the house of one of their handlers in Rawalpindi. At the request of the Pakistani investigation team, those items were DNA tested against human remains recovered from the crime scene by the FBI laboratory at Quantico, Virginia. The profiles indicated that 2 individuals who had been in that house died in the blast at Liaquat Bagh. That finding appeared in an early version of the charge sheet submitted to court. Then it was dropped without explanation. Sources close to the case gave 2 reasons. FBI representatives would not travel to Pakistan to testify, which made the report inadmissible under Pakistani evidence law, and investigators could not establish a chain of custody for the human remains, because the officials who first collected them had become untraceable. There is a second trace of this man. In the intercepted phone call the government released, 3 names are spoken: Saeed, Bilal, and Ikra Mullah. The conversation treats Saeed and Bilal as 2 different people. An inter-ministry document refers to Abdullah alias Saeed, the long-necked one, and places him at a failed attempt on her life in Peshawar the previous day, 26th December, abandoned because security there was too tight. Then he disappears from every confession in the file. Almost everyone who could have explained this case is dead. 2 of the facilitators were killed at a checkpost in January 2008. Another died handling explosives in May 2008. The alleged chief planner was killed in the first ever drone strike in Khyber Agency in May 2010. Baitullah Mehsud was killed by a drone in August 2009. Khalid Shahenshah, her security guard, filmed making gestures beside the stage during her final speech that investigators considered suspicious enough to require a full probe, was shot 4 times by gunmen on motorcycles outside his Karachi home in July 2008. That killing was never solved. Chowdhury Zulfikar, the lead prosecutor in her murder case, was shot dead in his car in Islamabad in May 2013, on his way to a hearing. One investigator's summary of it all: the links are broken forever. On 31st August 2017, nearly 10 years to the day, an anti-terrorism court delivered its verdict. All 5 accused militants were acquitted, and the court described them as scapegoats. Parvez Musharraf was declared an absconder and his properties ordered seized. He died in Dubai in February 2023, with that warrant still outstanding. The only 2 people convicted in the murder of Benazir Bhutto were Saud Aziz and Khurram Shahzad, the police officers, sentenced to 17 years each, not for killing her, for destroying the evidence and failing to protect her. Both were released on bail. One was reinstated to a senior police post. In the 8 years the appeals have sat with the Lahore High Court, there have been 7 hearings, all procedural. 18 years on, nobody has been convicted of the murder itself. She asked for 4 vehicles with tinted windows. She was refused. She asked why the streetlights were off. Nobody answered. She asked for foreign investigators. She was told her own government could be trusted with it. The security plan promised her 1,371 officers. The state that owed her those officers washed the street where she fell within 2 hours and preserved 23 pieces of evidence. She wrote the ending down in advance. The state simply read it and let it happen. If you liked this video, let me know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. I'm curious about that. And if you have a suggested topic, feel free to let me know in the comments.